you're partnering with your agencies to go ahead and make sure you utilize these funds to do some legacy system modernization. Kurt, do you want to come in? Kurt Wood? And you can unmute yourself now, Kurt. Go ahead and unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Little technical difficulty. So we're like other folks, we're waiting for the guidelines, but we've had some preliminary discussions. In our state, I think some folks know, we've been flush with a capital bond for many years. And we actually have a $680 million bond right now that we're working off of. We're in the first year of that cycle over a 5-year capital plan. So we have a strategic capital plan that we're working towards. So we're actually looking at, this opportunity to maybe, extend out our capital, because we're going to run out of authorization probably in the 4th year of the 5th year. So we have some major projects underway right now that we're looking at to see we might be able to substitute some of the federal funding, including our unemployment online and career center modernization. So we're certainly having a conversation with our Labor and Workforce Development Secretariat and agency, our Department of Unemployment Insurance, to see if we might be able to utilize that. We certainly have the plans ready to go from a procurement perspective, lining up the procurement itself. So right now we're going to try to figure if it's best to kind of leverage these funds or, use the capital. My objective is to be able to extend out our capital funds that we have over a program period of 5 years, that we can focus on some of our infrastructure modernization, cybersecurity, and things like that. So, we're in the very beginning stages. Hopefully we can have a little bit more detail next week. Our administration division, our budget folks are, they're a separate cabinet, and they control the dough, so to speak. They're very collaborative, but they're also very cagey about how they want to do things at times. So we work well together, but at the end of the day, they're the mothership, so to speak, and I still feel like they dropped us off of the church step at times. So, we still have to kind of work through that process with them. But we're looking at it. I think we certainly have an opportunity to, especially on the unemployment side of things, career. We have a new program where it's unemployment, reemployment, kind of model where we're going to start to look at how we can, modernize that process they're using these funds, and some other, maybe some maintenance and infrastructure areas.
Kurt, thank you for that. Stephanie, could you come in as well? How are you working with your agencies to go ahead and get this prioritized and get these funds in the right spot for the right technologies?
Hey, good afternoon. I just want to confirm that was directed to me. There might be other
stuff. Sorry, it's Stephanie.
Thank you. So, we're pretty consolidated in Tennessee, and so we have had a number of discussions with our IT leadership team to just begin to brainstorm on what some of those projects could be. Like so many have said in the chat, we're a little bit feel like we're on hold or pause until we get all the final recommendations or guidelines from the Treasury before we do too much work, because we don't want to invest a lot of cycles in projects that we can't go forward with. I can tell you from the CARES, the previous CRF funding, we generated some ideas for some enterprise initiatives, and then worked with our agency business leads to gauge their interest before we proceeded. So I see us doing the same thing. We have a pretty healthy long list of wish list at the moment, so we're definitely going to have to prioritize, and we'd be working with our state's administration who to get input from multiple players on how to prioritize our projects.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you hope they're ready when you're ready, right? That
Right.
they have the priorities in place, that you can make that happen. So Stephanie, thank you for that. Anybody else would like to come in on that question? Remember, use the virtual hand raise if you'd like to come in on the discussion. I'm not seeing any hand. Oh, we do have a hand raise. Calvin, come on in, Calvin.
All right, I think I'm on.
You are.
Perfect. Just to echo what JR was saying earlier, I was interested in a recent agency head meeting. The governor said, speaking to the funding that's coming, that we're going to use that funding to align to his priorities like broadband. Well, that was the entire list that he mentioned from the podium. So I said at least we were in the mix there. But our Office of Planning and Budget is taking requests that to get on that priority list. And so that's how we've been working with the agencies. But I really do think our list is going to be fairly short, and it's really going to be focused from our viewpoint, from the technology side in the broadband area, and then also in a few of the cybersecurity items.
Calvin, thank you. Terry?
Yeah, Calvin, can you just talk a little bit more? Because I think one of the challenges with the CARES Act funding was there were different views on whether or not the monies could be used for cybersecurity. So can you give us some thoughts on where you're seeing there are some opportunities? And then I'd like to hear from anybody else in terms of how you're going to fit within what the guidelines at least look like now to be able to spend some money on cybersecurity.
Right, and I know that we've pushed our request forward and had a pretty good ear with the governor's office, Office of Planning and Budget. Now, to which bucket of money they're looking to leverage to do that, I'm honestly not sure. It's really, at this point for us, it's been providing information in and then waiting to hear something back. So
Okay.
I think as we're continuing, I guess, to get just guidance, we've got a few items that we're interested in. So I want to mention cloud earlier. We've got a big initiative to move to the cloud, but so far that's been being funded from the state budget. So
Okay, John, good to see you.
Hi, Terry. Great to be seen. And good afternoon, everybody. In Pennsylvania, the first priority for American Recovery Plan Fund is to try to help as many residents of the Commonwealth as possible. Things like rental assistance, other kinds of spends, restaurateurs, many other of those, if you will, industries that have been very hard hit as a result of some of the situation we've gone through over the last 13 months and 2 weeks.
Okay.
That said, we've engaged with the legislators to start talking about if there was money available, what sort of recommendations would we have under the Office of Administration to help consume some of that money. Cybersecurity was at the top of the list. A couple of years ago, we developed a enterprise architecture-based capabilities model, and we're looking at filling in some of the gaps in an already mature program. And then there are other things like influencing how publicly funded networks need to interconnect and interoperate. That's a few of the thoughts from downtown Harrisburg, assuming I am in downtown Harrisburg.
Okay. Anybody else? John's given some great examples of how he's looking at, being able to utilize the funds. Anybody else want to chime in? Okay, Fred, there you go.
Thanks, Terry. We had a conversation with Gartner, and I suspect many of you have had a similar conversation. They've pulled together a great slide deck. And one of the things that came out of that was the line around to help states with revenue shortfalls. The way that they're reading at least things to date is that gives us sort of carte blanche at anything we want to do. We take our budget projections, we compare it to actual, and if that gap is, I don't know, $400 million, then in fact you can use $400 million for nearly anything you want, right? You can take up to that point as a revenue shortfall, and kind of pushing them saying, well, does that mean you should have had plans in place that suggested you were going to spend that money that way? And they said, no, it doesn't look like it's going to be that tight. Now, of course, we're waiting on certification from Treasury before we can really act on that. Our governor, very happy yesterday, she had a press conference and she sort of outlined buckets during this press conference of the way that she wishes to spend the money. And she did a hopefully she did us a solid, and it remains to see how the legislature responds. But she said, 50 million is simply going to go to IT improvements. And
Wow.
so we're hoping that that kind of sticks, but it'll leave us a lot of wiggle room. The one thing, and I feel a little bit like a Debbie Downer here, that came out of the Gartner conversation, and I don't want to spread misinformation if I have misinterpreted this, but I went back and asked again and said, what I heard you say was, and that's the time frame upon which we'll get that criteria. I mean, I had heard in every briefing until last week or till Monday that it was 60 days from the time that the act was passed. And that was when the Treasury had to get us money in the criteria. But in fact, what Gartner was suggesting was that that's not the case for all elements of it, including the state relief package. That in fact, we'll probably get the certification, the local government money will come out in this time frame. We have to get it out to local governments, but that the money that we're talking about, the certification process has not begun, and they actually have 60 days from when they begin that process to bring that to a close. So I don't want to be spreading misinformation, but it was a curveball that Gartner threw at me earlier this week. And I was just kind of going through slides just to get the very specific language, and I haven't pulled it up yet.
Thanks, Fred. That's great input for everybody. I think, just in terms of as everybody's thinking about it, they don't have their plans in place, with their priorities, just, some perspective. Also, everybody should be able to use Fred. If Fred gets that 50 million, you might all want to use him as an example and say, Fred got some money, so why aren't I going to get my money too? So thanks, Fred, for sharing that. I think everybody really appreciates it. So Jim, how's North Carolina?
Oh, it's doing fine. I just wanted to, here in North Carolina, a large preponderance of the ARP funds coming to North Carolina will be focused on broadband and addressing broadband across four main themes around accessibility, affordability, inequity, and literacy. The second area that's really going to be honed in on is around improving data analytics and looking at how we can continue the positive movement forward that we saw during the pandemic of breaking down some of those data silos and getting to better outcomes and metrics as a result of data analytics. So especially in our human services arena, Dr. Cohen has very clearly indicated, some of the outcomes that she's looking for and trying to bring together disparate data sets to help her navigate the agency forward over the next few years. The interesting question I have for some of you is, what are you all looking at, especially around broadband, as it relates to local municipalities, local government, and their receipt of broadband or funds that could be used for broadband? Are you looking, what kind of guidance or frameworks, if anything, is being put out there? Are you looking at state matching and encouraging certain behavior by saying, hey, if you go this way, the state will help match in some of these other areas? So, and if that's something we're going to cover later, Terry, that's great. I can wait till later. But if that's a topic that's relevant right now, I'd be interested in hearing some perspectives.
No, I think that's a great topic, Jim. Let's get some input. Calvin, maybe I'll go to you first. And yeah, there you go. Because I think you were talking very heavily about broadband. So what are you thinking about in terms of, how you'll be working with local government with those monies?
Great. Well, I guess the first thing is right now, our agency's got an RFP out on the street to qualify the service providers across the state. We've got somewhere around 40 service providers that provide the typical type of broadband service. And then legislation was just passed this last year to allow our electric membership co-ops, and that probably brings another 40 to the table. And so, in talking to our provider advisory committee, they're like, we really don't want to have to go to every county and work out T's and C's with every one of these. It's just really going to slow the process down. So between our agency and the Department of Community Affairs, who's trying to drive the broadband initiative for the state, said, okay, I believe we can qualify providers and then come up with the master service agreement that then all the cities and counties could leverage to actually because with our program, we have a state gratuities law here that doesn't allow us to give money directly to a provider. So we would partner through the local entity to do that, which would be either be a development authority or a city or county government. And that proposal through the grant program is envisioned to be like third, so that we'd look to the provider to put in a third. We'd look for the local government to use some of their funding that they're receiving to fund a third of the effort, and then the state. And it will be scored based on, could you do that? There's a few carve outs. We've got a set of very rural and not wealthy counties that their ability to leverage their third for that. There's probably other needs. So we will target some of those counties where the state will probably have to put in a larger share to compensate for that. So that's the approach. We also felt like if you had to come in through our procurement process, we could at least try to make sure that a certain level of provider can actually do the hard work it's going to take to deliver the services, versus some of the people that might decide, hey, there's a lot of money there, I want to go jump in and try to get a piece of the action. So, so far we've had good response from both our locals and counties, as well as the service providers that would be participating.
Well, thanks, Calvin. Does anybody else want to jump in as it relates to broadband? Because I know that you all have a different level of responsibility for broadband, depending upon where you are. So anybody else want to jump in here on, what's happening in your state? Mike Leahy, can I go to you? And anything happening in Maryland?
Certainly. Hi, Terry. As you will recall, the legislature took responsibility for broadband away from the IT agency 3 years ago and gave it to the Department of Housing and Community Development on the theory that because they were bankers, and this was going to take lots of money, and that their customer base would be people that also needed housing and other services that they provided, that they were a better focus point for the actual efforts from a financing standpoint. And our principal interest in this last year has been talking to all of the potential low orbiting satellite operators about working with our systems, and obviously with the federal regulators at NTIA, about freeing up some of the BTOP installed infrastructure for commercial uses under some very specific conditions where they were required to service areas that wouldn't otherwise receive service.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's an interesting space, Mike, to go back into thinking about those old BTOP grants and what was happening there. Josh, let me go to you. What's happening in West Virginia?
Yeah, hey, I think I've got some concerns about the fact that we're flooding this broadband with the RDOF money, right? RDOF round one's already moving forward, and then now we've got this money. Are we going to run the risk? And I'm afraid that there's going to be project timelines that are going to get set, and we're going to have no way to meet them, because I just concerned about workforce and the equipment to actually support all this build out, because everybody's going to go after it all at once. And I don't know. I think that that's something that we're going to run a risk of if the money gets executed right. But I don't know. I have concerns because I feel like in West Virginia we're still fighting the poor map approach that, honestly, in my opinion, just it allows for the provider to stake claim and try to prevent money from going in areas that they claim are served that the people who live there would say otherwise. So if we don't really address that component of it, then I don't know. I've got fears that just throwing money at it's not going to actually fix the problem.
All right. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate that. Well, we got just a couple more minutes on this topic. Does anybody else want to jump in here in terms of what's happening in your state, or any observations about it. Hey, Dennis, I'll turn to you. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. It's good to see you all virtually. Something weird happened in New Hampshire as it relates to broadband, and COVID kind of drove it. Where the governor put me forward as the person that had to make the vaccination registration effort successful, kind of as a pressure tactic. And when it worked, people then thought, oh, maybe we ought to talk to this person about broadband. So it was like this, so now all of a sudden, where I was sort of a little on the sidelines before, now I'm kind of in the middle of it. And so it was an interesting byproduct. So I thought you guys might get a kick out of that.
Yeah, Dennis, when you're successful, then that's the good news and bad news, right? Of kind of what has happened.
Indeed.
Well, this was a great discussion, and clearly there's still a lot of room for all of us, to kind of understand when the monies actually come in, when the guidelines actually come in. So I think this is a topic that we'll continue to pursue, and maybe a great topic when we get to our August summit, because we've got our summit coming up August 12th and 13th, and many of you will actually have some better definition on the monies by then, and also maybe some better ideas of, particularly around that broadband topic, how you're organizing for it to, avoid what Josh was talking about, which is sort of the squeaky wheel, and how that conversation is going to go. Well, we're going to go into our breakouts now. A few quick reminders before we get going. All of you have been assigned to a breakout based on the preference that you had indicated. We're going to use the raise hand function again for all of you to speak. You'll still have the chat function within your room. And very important, don't click the leave room button. That'll only just mean that you'll exit for the entire event. As I mentioned, you're going to stay in your breakout sessions for the rest of the event. It will be part discussion and some great fun. Just so all of you know, I'm going to kind of be doing what I normally would do at a dinner, which is to circulate around to the different breakout rooms so I can see everybody and hear how the conversation is going. Now, the other thing is that your moderators will be asking you about, as we get everybody in the breakout rooms, for a picture. So, please make sure that you stay on so that we get your smiling face as a part of the session. So as I said, we have 4 exciting sessions planned, and here are our moderators to tell you about them.
Hi, everyone. Phil Bertolini, co-director of the Center for Digital Government. My session is Sharing is Caring, Shared Services for the Future. We're going to talk about what it's like to share technologies and work across government lines to get things done. Now, if you've already chosen Sharing is Caring, you're going to stay right with me in the main session. I look forward to seeing you there.
Hey, it's Joe Morris, Vice President of Research with the Center for Digital Government. And I'm hosting the Now You See It, Now You Don't Cyber Fraud in the New World session. The pandemic's increased the risk for fraud across a number of key government programs. We're going to be discussing what threats CIOs are facing and what actions they're taking to deal with it. Don't miss out.
Hi, everyone. Steve Towns here, Deputy Chief Content Officer for eRepublic. And I'm hosting Living on the Edge, Innovation in a Post-Pandemic World. Over the past year, we've seen what innovative technologies like AI-powered chatbots can do. We'll talk about the future of these and other technologies and what it means to you. See you there.
Hi, it's Alan Cox, publisher of Government Technology Magazine. I'm hosting Plug and Play, how to use low code, no code to get it done. Many of you have already gotten started on this path and others are looking to follow. We'll have a great discussion.
All right, fantastic, everybody. Well, now we're going to be moving into our breakout rooms.
Looks like the reshuffling is happening. Don't you just love that when you reshuffle all the squares? Hi, everyone. Welcome to our breakout, Sharing is Caring. I'm excited to talk to you about it. You know, there's always been this issue of how governments can work together. And if you think about what took place in the mid-2000s with the recession, there was this big push to shared services, but then everybody's budget started to heal a bit and kind of people pulled away a little bit. So what we want to talk about, is there room for sharing technologies? Is it strictly procurement, or can you actually share the technology itself? And then also, how are bigger governments or states engaging with those local governments as well in their jurisdiction about their ability to share? So what I'd like to do now, before we get started, looks like we still got some folks popping in here, but we're going to do our group photo. So we're going to get our person on the other end of this is watching and listening for us. We're going to all smile for 10 seconds, and then they're going to take the photo. So everybody, please put your camera on. There's Sharon. Hi, Sharon. So everybody get ready. On 3, you're going to smile. 1, 2, 3.
Got it.
Awesome. We have a photograph. Success. All right. What I want to talk about and get started, if I could, is there's so many different opportunities for shared services, whether it's across the state agencies or it's across, potentially government lines. Are there more opportunities now? Have the budget challenges that have presented themselves to government really put this more on the front burner? So if I could, Sharon, could you come in and talk a little bit about what your thoughts are? And I hear you have quite a unique position in regard to shared services as well. So Sharon, I think you're on mute.
So Sharon just messaged me about 30 seconds ago saying, I got to step away. I just got a call on something urgent and I'll be back. So I suspect you want to hold that question.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. I appreciate that. John Hoffman, if you could come in, please, and talk to us a little bit about the shared services front in Texas.
Sure. I mean, as an agency within collaboration for all the different Texas systems, we certainly have got that front. We pulled together the Shared Technology Services Group. We're leveraging it, trying to get to an IT as a service kind of model, right? We started with data center. We're aggregating in security, open data portals, all these different services. But when you start talking across a multi-state environment, though, it gets really interesting. We've done just a little bit where a common vendor, we shared some services with Georgia to try and see if there's efficiencies there, backup, redundancy kind of things. We've looked at, are there different entities that we could do a larger swap, maybe neighboring states, just from a continuity of operations. The only thing that we've found really that from a standpoint of hitting the simple button, hitting the easy button, if you will, is around the contracts. We can leverage similar contracts from the vendor community that we've gone through, vetted out, and different states leverage that. I wish, and I believe that through cloud technologies, there may be a bit of more government solutions in a box that we can see through low code and different types of evolution and microservices and that, where there may be components that we can pick and drive an easier, simpler way to implement our own. But beyond that, government has built the foundation about each state being unique in its requirements, its different components, and so it just makes it tough to just plug and play state to state from an actual application operational side.
So John, during the pandemic, everybody had to move quick. There were a lot of things that had to happen. Did that help with the procurement side of things? Do you think that procurement's going to shift a bit for shared services now that everybody moved so fast during the pandemic?
It helped us because we had an emergency declaration that gave us a little more leeway. When that ends, it will go back to the way it was, no doubt about it. But I do think that there is an expectation culturally that may change in the ability of, how do we process those a little faster? It used to be a long question and rigor around the establishment of the solution to get through the procurement and all these things. I hope that we can develop a little more agile process in that methodology while still going back to, all of the different integrity of the procurement process pieces that we had before.
John, thank you for that. Fred, could you come on in on that from a shared services perspective? What are you seeing out there? And are the budget challenges making shared services more important today?
They certainly are. I would say things, certainly from the IT perspective, cyber has really become a game changer, right? Those agencies that really would like to hold out and they don't want to come and play, this has really forced their hand, right? That they're starting to recognize they couldn't keep up. And so that, I never want to say that our cyber problems are helpful, but on that front it is. But the place where I think it was really fortuitous to have things in place was actually just the sort of bread and butter of who's able to respond and ramp up networks and PC distribution and put more processing power under certain applications. And so I think we're able to deliver some things through the pandemic that just, standalone silos would not have been able to deliver. We were uniquely positioned. So there is a beauty around what just happened for us. And I think to John's point, procurement, we were just like procurement, right? Suddenly under the gun saying, yeah, there's rules, but we have authorization to break them. We're gonna move things quicker than we ought to. I'm sure we'll be forgiven if we screw it up, given the circumstances. And there's now a lot of people saying, hey, you did that and it kind of worked. Can you keep doing that? And so I am curious, how far backwards are we actually going to go with some of those things?
That's interesting too, because that's the concern out there too, is that everything moved quicker, things happened. Now the question is, does it slow back down again a bit to a more methodical process? So that'll be very interesting going forward. John McMillan, you put something in the chat that was really interesting. Do you want to talk to the group about that from a shared services perspective?
So many mute buttons, so little time. We've been working on a number of things. Our shared services journey started in late 2016, formalized in 2017. During the pandemic, we converged on a single virtual private network solution. It had been a bit of a dog's breakfast in the past, and now we have one solution. And now we have a way of optimizing connectivity to the state network and securing resources along the way. We have other solutions in our portfolio, everything from app streaming to virtual desktop infrastructure. So those were some of the things that were either in our portfolio or we acquired during the pandemic. We provisioned new compute devices to workers that were previously expected to deliver customer-facing services from traditional office spaces. And now they're doing it over through, virtual rooms like we're doing this now. Everything from county assistance to other customer-facing services. We changed laws in order to support, for example, the sale of automobiles in the way that couldn't have been done in the past, where notary publics had to verify more than just the identity that certain signature processes were actually intended for the purpose. We've done a lot of other things. We've built new applications from scratch in sometimes hours or days, not all of it in low code. We've done lots of other things around new portals for PPE. I'm going to yield the floor here. Phil, I could probably talk for most of the rest of the afternoon about what we've done in the last 13 months and 2 weeks.
John, thank you for sharing all that. That's amazing. We also have some fun we want to have in this session. So I'm going to throw out a fun question. So get ready to go ahead and either just since there's not that many people, you can just put your hand up on the screen. When and where was the margarita invented? So you got margarita glasses, you got Jason, when and where was the margarita invented?
All right, I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but I'm new to Dallas, Texas, and we did go to a restaurant that has a plaque on the wall and claims to be the founder of the frozen margarita. So I don't know if that counts, but I'm gonna say Dallas, Texas.
You know what? You were at least you were talking about a margarita, but we were not talking about the frozen margarita. But good try. Derek, you had your hand up. When and where was the margarita invented?
I believe it was 1930. It was invented in, oh goodness gracious, what was the name of the bartender? I'm drawing blank. It was either south of San Diego. Was it Rosarita, Mexico?
No, you got the country right. So it wasn't Mexico. So you ready?
I thought it was Lexington. I thought it was Lexington, Kentucky.
Well,
no, that would be Jim Beam.
That'd be like the bourbon. That'd be the bourbon margarita, right? All right. So yeah, it was 1938, and it was in Rancho La Gloria, Mexico. That's where the margarita was invented. All right. So let's go ahead and let's step back a little bit too and talk about the cloud, because there was so much in regard to modernization and how people would utilize the cloud to go ahead and push their systems forward. But do you think that's a big play right now? Does the cloud help you here or does it hinder you here? So who wants to come in on that one? Just raise your hand if you want. Rajiv, do you want to come in and talk a little bit about the cloud? So you just have to unmute there.
Yeah, sure. So before I go there, I wanted to touch base a little bit on the shared services.
Sure.
And how we missed a few opportunities we could have leveraged. The last year has been, the global pandemic. It was a great unifier in terms of being able to address a crisis that was common to all of us, and we missed the opportunity. I mean, I'm sorry I'm being candid, but here's the problem, right? We had, through this forum, we could have had the opportunity to share ideas and share technology platforms, truly talk about shared services, scheduling for vaccine status, whatever else from the COVID perspective that we were doing, right? Each one's trying to come up with a solution. Digitizing the DMV, maybe. These are all common problems that all of us had, and we missed the opportunity. It's not too late. We're still talking about jumpstarting the economy. We're talking about all those things. So let's ideate along those lines to say, hey, who's doing what? So maybe we could share that idea, maybe for interstate opportunities where people are traveling. How about we make it easier for the citizens when they're traveling for tourism or for whatever purpose to be able to follow the guidelines of the city they're traveling to and be able to safely navigate the systems, because it's going to be a complex system where each state has its own unique set of requirements in terms of what you're allowed to do and where you're allowed to go, to what degree you're allowed to do what you're supposed to do, right? So opportunities, right? Plenty. We should continue to talk about shared services. Let's not give up on that from an interstate perspective. It's something we should continue to explore and probably even put on the table what we have accomplished for the state and see if anybody else can leverage it. It probably is not a bad idea to have a breakout session on just that,
Right.
even if it's not today. Some other time, just do something to say, how many of you guys have got some things that are programmed towards reopening or reviving the economy? And what are those ideas? Maybe we don't have to share it, but we could just bring the idea and re-implement in our scenario. So it's just bringing minds together to start to solve the problem that's common to all of us, right?
So Rajiv, I totally agree with you that there's a great opportunity here. And as you know, that's why I think the opportunity was missed in the mid 2000s during the recession.
Yep.
This is another opportunity to do it.
Yep.
From a shared services perspective, though, does the cloud help that?
I'm going there right now. So
yeah.
When we got into the pandemic and we started with, remember, trying to track who was infected, what the numbers were, and then starting to embark on this journey of contact tracing, and then down to scheduling, and then to vaccination, and all of these things that New York did them all in the cloud. No doubt. We have a large, sophisticated data center. We can certainly drive a lot of this in there. but the ease at which we could deploy and partner with tech companies, the cloud played a major part in our ability to deliver. It continues to do that while I don't know how many of you recognize the fact that New York State has implemented something called an Excelsior Pass that is a digitalized version of your CDC card that proves that you're vaccinated. Okay. That's all done again in the cloud. So these are all things that we're working on, but they're purely driven either through a SaaS platform or in the cloud in GCP, Amazon. It doesn't matter wherever we can go with it. We'll find the best fit. And what it has certainly exposed us to is the fact that we are not as ready as we should be to support that infrastructure. This term cloud admin hits me in the side of the head every day now with the fact that we are data center admins. We understand how to do that there. The paradigm shifts completely when you talk about the cloud. There are things, the terminologies, our technicians are struggling, but they're learning as they go. So that maturity, I've started a process of taking and identifying a group of people and retraining them to take on that, because I don't see us turning away from the cloud after this pandemic. It's going to continue to go there. As a matter of fact, we're going to try to move a lot of public facing in there for the sheer scale of what it can do. Unemployment, when you're getting hit 100,000 transactions a minute, right? We managed for a month to keep it running in the data center. But when that started ramping up to, we were going to almost 500,000 an hour, there was no way the mainframe was going to be able to keep it up without us being able to store and forward. So moved it to the cloud. We did a pub sub implementation where we could throttle it to the mainframe. So the mainframe is not keeling over, even though it's a large mainframe. It is never built to handle that many transactions in real time. So these are challenges, and the cloud really stepped in for us there. And that's how we solved a lot of these problems. And we continue to explore it. We're going to go to the next round of unemployment. It's called excluded workers. There's a program that's just being started for about $2.1 billion to be given out to excluded workers. That's going to be implemented purely in the cloud. Another thing we're looking at, I'm sorry if I'm oversharing or if it's out of topic for you guys, is document validation has become a critical component and a bottleneck in almost all of the social services payouts that are happening, right? Because that's ramping up fraud. And so that is another thing we're looking at very extensively through AI. So we're looking at that as a shared service. So all of these social service agencies will consume that as a service and be able to run their checks through there. Fraud prevention is another thing. So a lot of ID proofing is being added as layers. WAF protection is being added as layers. Bot deterrents are being added. I mean, on a daily basis, we are continuously tweaking our cloud infrastructure and our on-prem infrastructure to mitigate these things. Well, we'll see 100,000 new accounts created in our identity system in an hour, right? Yeah. So these are things that you never had to deal with, but now we have to react. So we have RPA running in there behind that. So it's just undoing what the bots are doing. It's just comical to watch, but that's our lives now.
Yeah, Rajiv, thank you for sharing all that. That was excellent. Rob Cohen, I want you to come in from from our partner perspective. What are you seeing the cloud playing a role in shared services for government?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a couple things. So the pandemic certainly unveiled a lot of opportunities, right, in terms of what the cloud can do for us, not only at scale but at speed. During the pandemic, we talk about contact tracing and vaccine management and so many different use cases where the surge was hugely problematic for government agencies to deal with, and shared service models started popping up everywhere. I think there's a lot of lessons learned from that we should really try to capitalize on as we turn the corner here. Bots might be an example. There's going to be a lot of others as well, particularly around SaaS. I think when we look at shared service models coming up in the next generation, SaaS and PaaS and what these use cases look like and how do we support some of these missions. And I think those are going to be huge. And they're already multi-tenant by design. So, in terms of getting it kind of set up to where different agencies can have, different models, the cloud is really good for that. The other thing is,
Go ahead.
Well, the only other thing is, NASCIO has been talking about CIO as a broker, the future of the role of CIO, et cetera, brokering these capabilities, cloud, services in general. I really think, and those are on chargeback models in large part. So I really think there's some huge insights there for us as we move forward.
Rob, thank you for sharing that. Craig Orgeron, come on in here on the cloud too. Do you see that as a vehicle for shared services?
Yeah, thanks, and good to see everybody. So I wanted to kind of double click on the accomplishments during the pandemic that state CIOs and CIOs have had. I mean, I do agree totally with the technology piece being center stage and how that really has changed the game. So Phil, I think without sounding overly nerdy, spend a lot of time thinking about the value proposition, right? As a 10-year state CIO and NASCIO president, the value proposition of shared services, is there a, who moved my cheese moment in terms of value with central IT, right? I mean, shared services were, at least inside of a data center, premised on platforms that could be shared or solutions that could be shared. And I think it pivoted on, volume and unit cost, right? Didn't all of us go to the Capitol and talk about, we want more people to use it so it drives the price down in chargeback? And I think one way to really think about this from a cloud perspective is, where is that value proposition happening now? And I think that's a way to begin to think about what cloud can bring, right? Because several of the folks have talked about the speed. Rajiv was talking about the speed and agility to kind of get those things moving. I kind of really agree that I don't think that's going back, right? I mean, I do think the pandemic both put CIOs in the driver's seat, but then I also think the successes that we're seeing, the speed and agility that you can get there with, I think it's really changing a fundamental value component of how CIOs saw shared services, right? How we sold them, how I sold them. And I'm really fascinated at that, right? And it really gets to your question, Phil, right? Does cloud make that better, easier, more difficult? John's point in the chat about the training, I think is spot on, right? You've got to have, and Rajiv talked about it too, you've got to have that component there, I think, to add value. There was two things since leaving government that I will admit transparency, I think I was slow on. One was workforce. I don't think I fully grappled with how dramatic the paradigm shift is in the skill sets needed in the cloud era. And then two, I think the value proposition, right? The value framework of how to get solutions into production. And, I really struggled with the data centers, to be really candid, of really understanding what made the data center tick in 1981 or 1991 and 2001. And if you sort of went down that list, where's that value framework now? And I think that's a really telling way to sort of think about the challenges that state CIOs and states have of ingesting these platforms. And it doesn't matter which one. Actually, I probably shouldn't say that, but AWS, Microsoft, Google, or others, being able to ingest those strategically in a way that I'm kind of biased. I do sort of think the state CIO should be in the center of things, right? And not marginalized in any other way. Same for cities or counties. And so I'm sort of fascinated by the value piece, right? And the migration of these potential legacy models to next generation models and what that means. So
Excellent. Craig, thank you for that. We only have about 25 minutes left, so I want to make sure everybody gets in here. So I want to go to Jim Weaver. Your perception on the cloud and how that impacts shared services in your state.
So again, as I indicated in the chat, and I was glad to hear some folks start talking about, the focus is people, process, technology. We really got to hone in on the people and the process component. To me, we spend too much time talking about cloud from a technology aspect. To me, cloud is a delivery mechanism to achieve the outcomes and enable outcomes that we're looking for. If we do not have the people and the processes put to place, the cloud will become exponentially a panacea again for us, just like and sometimes server sprawl and everything else that we've all seen during our careers. So we've been really focusing in on the people and the process aspects in order to be prepared and enable the cloud opportunities when they do come. But again, if you're not taking a look at your application portfolio, if you're not doing the right things with your applications, if people continue to do what they've always done, and we, in deference to our colleagues here from the private sector, and some, cloud is not necessarily a more cost-effective solution for us. And so we have to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right times that the cloud affords us to be able to do. But shared services to me is more around concepts, and it's working around the business aspects. Again, going back to the people and the processes to show and deliver the value that they're looking for. Cloud is a tool in our toolbox to help deliver on that. But I struggle a little bit when I hear it's the primary focus of the conversation, because too often, as you all know, we technologists love to talk about the technology. And really, at the end of the day, it's about the business and it's about the process, and most importantly, our people. That's going to get us there.
Jim, I couldn't agree more. It is all about how you get things done, how you get the people to be able to be ready to get those things done. All right, I have another fun question for you. What plant is tequila made from? What plant is tequila made from? Derek.
Agave.
What's that?
Agave.
The agave plant. Well done. All right, I have one other fun question.
Oh, wait a minute, Phil. I think Derek has his Alexa device tuned into your voice. And
So I'm going to have to change my voice when I ask the next question, right, Jim?
It's that or I
right.
spend too much time studying cocktails. One of the other.
All right, this is a tough one, though. You ready? The origin of Cinco de Mayo centers on a battle with what famous army general? Jim.
Wasn't that Napoleon?
It was Napoleon. Now, here's the bonus question. What year did the battle take place?
Does it really matter? Because by then I had enough tequila in me, or?
Any guesses? What year did that battle take place? It was Napoleon III. All right, I'm going to give it to you. 1862. So now we're armed with that big piece of information to go forward. All right, guys, I want to come back in and let's go. We're going to go Steve Nichols first, then we'll go Doug. But I want to ask you: is shared procurement vehicles, are they going to be more used now in state agencies than they had before? And are you seeing them used more in local governments in your state as well, Steve?
Yeah, so I should say that in Georgia, I'm going to answer your second question first. We've always, for as long as I've been here, like 20 years, the procurement agency, they put piggyback provisions in that lets local government buy off of the contract. So like our Microsoft EA, I don't know, we got 85,000 seats, probably half of those are local government. Cellular contracts, we've got like, I don't know, 150,000 subscribers. 90% of those are local government. So where it makes sense, like the marketplace, the locals really vote with their feet, and we see them, pile into these things. Other contracts, not so much. So we always try to leave that open. I would say that the need to move quickly, really, the counterbalance of people wanting it to do their way, maybe having agency lawyers who have particular contract concerns they want to address, that got washed away pretty quickly during the pandemic. And it just became like, do you have a contract for X? Can you do an emergency procurement for Y? Or just, can we buy through you, through one of your contracts?
And I think that now that people have got a taste of that, and it generally worked pretty well, that's gonna stick around after the pandemic.
Thank you, Steve. Doug, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think you hit on an interesting point. And when we look at ourselves as an enterprise shared services provider as a whole, I think the procurement vehicle plays a big part in that. So we're actually engaged right now, partnering with Robin and company and digging into our shared services portfolio. It's 65 services at about $50 million coming in, and it's too much. Right. We shouldn't be in the business of 65 things as a government entity. We don't have the business to do it. But where we're headed isn't in one direction, it's three. It's what should we just be, a broker to a great statewide agreement for? Right. So instead of actually fulfilling the service ourselves, instead of standing up the technology ourselves, how could we just be a knowledge broker and a strategic advisor to some of these agencies, and be the ones that are negotiating with the vendor to make sure that we're getting a procurement vehicle in place that's representative of the state spend, right? So for Arizona, that's 130 agencies and 40,000 employees. And we've gotten a lot of great traction taking that approach with a lot of the biggest tech companies that engage with the state. I think, our second prong is where can we be a broker and really, they might be coming through us to consumer service, but we're partnering out, right? We're realizing that there's somebody that can do it better, faster, cheaper than we can, and can really add more value. And we want to get out of the way, and that leaves that third bucket, which is what can we manage and what should we manage? And, I think you're going to see cloud-based technologies scattered across all of those different things. But for us, we're really putting the focus on what are the core things for the state that we can enterprise and that makes sense in a shared services model. And what are the things where, as long as we align with the agencies in terms of our guiding principles and adopting SaaS, right, or adopting PaaS or different things, we can get out of the way a little bit and let the agencies configure these platforms to the way that meet their business needs, and ultimately serve the citizen experience. So we're really trying to take a dynamic approach to do this the right way, because Arizona is a federated state, but for us, it isn't about being federated or centralized. It's just about finding ways to scale and do things the right way from our enterprise office and leverage technology and our partners to get to the best possible outcomes.
Excellent. I like the multi-phases there, Doug, and I like that multidisciplinary approach as well, looking at it from multiple angles to make sure it gets done the right way. Well done, Doug. Thank you. Now, we haven't heard from Michael Isolda. We haven't heard from Derek and Jason. So what I want you to do is, if we could, we're about maybe 12 minutes or so from getting ready to wrap up. But Michael, could you start and just say, what are you seeing out there in shared services? And are those shared vehicles starting to be used more as you look around the country?
Hi, thanks. Being in local government for all those 32 years and running a shared service between our town, school, and police, and dealing with county and state and national contracts and co-ops, the relaxing the restrictions throughout the states during this pandemic has made it much easier for procurement. And the shared service, we talked about it, Phil, that in the top 10 NASCIO kind of got moved out because budgets took priority, and cyber, always number one, it moved down, but it's still at 11. I have a feeling is once we get through the stimulus funding and where we can afford it in the operating budget, once the money's gone, we got to think about that it's going to move back up, because we're going to need to be able to share people and resources and maintenance and aggregate spends, because we're not going to have the stimulus forever. So we're seeing a lot of that in budgets concerns that more collaboration is happening, especially at county and municipal governments in backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service. So those are trends that I'm seeing throughout the country. Okay, New Jersey especially, but that's what we're seeing.
Michael, thank you. Derek, your thoughts on that. What are you seeing out there? Are they using those shared procurement vehicles to get things in place quicker?
Well, I think they are, and I think it's interesting our discussion. And I'm going to sort of take off my McAfee hat a little bit and draw on my 22 years of being at, in Commonwealth of Kentucky at the COT there, and then most recently here in Texas, where I work for the Health and Human Services Agency. But we've talked about shared services. Okay, we have contracts that facilitate it, right? And then we have shared service platforms or solutions that can accelerate our business and that allow us to, whether it's a centralized or a federated model. Sometimes services have to be able to support, having more than one master, right? And so those services are configurable so that agency one or agency two can kind of maybe configure it their way, or the way that we've kind of been describing a little bit more. And it's always been a patch, especially when I went to Kentucky, when most of the states are, quite frankly, very small and very poor and technology deprived. I think that those are opportunities that we have to leverage to have a better citizen experience. But I think it's interesting, and I'm gonna leverage something Michael said, and I don't think he necessarily crossed over. I think it's super important. We can have the contracts, we can have the solutions, we can have the platforms that can excel and do all these things. But I think there's an underlying thing in the chat that somebody was talking about educating their workforce, and I think with somebody else, maybe it was Jem who talked, or John talked about. I know you've been my friend Craig, Dr. Orgeron mentioned, a little bit about maybe marginalizing how different it was in the cloud, and that skill set. And I'd be interested I think an interesting thing that we need to think about overcoming is how to share services in terms of people and expertise, especially if it's within a state, pushing that down again to rural municipalities and cities and counties that that are probably technology deprived in a lot of ways, or even across state platforms in a way that we can really leverage what we may have done really well in Kentucky. I still think they do a number of great things there. Maybe here in Texas, where I am now, we do some things, and it's beyond. I think it has to go one step farther. It has to go beyond just contracts, platforms, and solutions, but it has to go to people and expertise.
Eric, thank you for that. Jason, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to that. I would just say that I was interested in having or being a part of this discussion based on procurement just in general. And what I see from our perspective is that in some of the states that I work with, Texas being an example, I think at times they get the kind of the best solution, the best price, because we're able to customize it for the state and what they're looking to accomplish. But at times it's easier for our contracts team, procurement group to work with NASCIO just because it's broad and it covers a larger area. So I'm looking for those best practices as far as how do we accelerate getting the right products and solutions on contract that you find value for your agencies. Because I think for government agencies, some of those state contracts are a good option from a cost and availability perspective, but they're not always the quickest to be able to get things done at scale when you're working within a large organization.
Jason, thanks for sharing that too. Great advice and great thoughts there. All right, we're gonna have a little more fun here, guys. So it's Cinco de Mayo. And so CIOs, get ready. John, you're going to start this. You ready? It's Cinco de Mayo. Your CISO walks in your office and says blank, and you respond with blank. And keep it clean, guys. So your CISO walks in the office and says blank, and you respond with blank.
Ransomware, and call the lawyers.
Oh, ransomware and call the lawyers. I like it. John Hoffman, CISO says blank and you respond with?
Did you see the email? And I respond with, oh no.
I love it. Rajiv, the CISO walks in the door, Cinco de Mayo, and says blank and you respond with blank. You're on mute. You're on mute. So that could be one response.
Yeah, well, we have a problem, and my responsibility is, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I love Fred. CISO walks in, says blank, you respond with?
Well, given my CISO, he comes in and asks for money to buy the next shiny object. And I say, what are you going to stop spending money on so you can afford it?
Yeah, that's that comment. So sometimes that argument happens a lot in life, doesn't it? Steve Nichols, CISO walks in, says blank, and you respond with?
Sounds like trouble.
So what's the CISO say though to get you to say?
It doesn't matter. No. I mean, in before times, that was always the joke. It's like you see the CISO maybe with his deputy, and I mean, this is across multiple people in the seat. Didn't matter. It was just like, all right, round up the executive team, get in the CIO workroom. It's trouble.
Yeah, I love it. Doug, CISO walks in and says blank, and you respond with?
Regardless of what he says, if he walks in my office, I'm telling him to get out of my house.
Ah, yeah, because everybody's in their living room now, right? John McMillan. Well, we already went to you, didn't we? We said it earlier. Sorry about that. All right, Jim Weaver. CISO walks in, says blank, and you respond with?
Can we talk now? What happened?
Now what happened? I love it. I love it. All right, guys, one more piece of fun, and then we're going to do some closing advice on our panel. So here's my question for all of you. Many say that people look like their pets. Do you think that's even more true after the pandemic? Who wants to come in? Raise your hand. You think that you look like your pets. Is it more true after the pandemic? Jason.
Well, I'm going to say yes, because we had a rule for a while that you didn't have to shave on a regular basis. So I think we're all getting pretty furry. So that's probably a yes.
All right. Anybody else? Any thoughts there?
To Jason's comment, I don't know if we look more like our pets, but if we're sitting at home not shaving, we're probably also starting to smell like our pets.
Oh, nice. All right, let's switch the question up a little bit. Did anybody pick up a really strange hobby during the pandemic? Anything that's out of the ordinary? Did someone pick up an interesting hobby during the pandemic? Nobody? Oh, Rajiv.
I had to drop a few.
You had to drop a few hobbies?
No time.
Go anywhere.
Absolutely no time. No time.
Yep. Anybody else pick up something interesting or fun during the pandemic? I'm guessing that's a no. All right. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we have about 6 or so minutes left. So I'm going to ask you to go quick. I want your advice. That one important piece of advice that you would give everybody in regard to shared services. Now I've got everybody on my screen, so I'm just going to go in the order you're on my screen. Craig Orgeron, what's that one piece of advice?
Relationships matter.
Relationships matter. And it's important to get to know each other because you got to get that win-win, right? Perfect. Jason.
Yeah, I would just say the reminder that we're all trying to solve the same problems, so we can come up with the solutions together.
Yeah, ways to partner together to come up with those solutions for shared services. Excellent. John Hoffman, what's your piece of advice for everybody in regard to shared services?
Make sure we understand governance.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. You know, for those of you that some of you didn't know me, I was a CIO for 20 years for Oakland County, Michigan. And I can tell you that the people that walked in the room that didn't know, it was a much tougher discussion to have. So if you want to partner and share, just make sure some homework gets done ahead of time. I love that, John. Thank you. Steve Nichols, your piece of advice.
I mean, what John just said, Derek touched on it as well. The governance is really difficult when you get a lot of agencies. And to tie it back to the cloud question, what we find is we're either in a situation, I mean, our core constituent group is like 14 agencies that represent 70%. So it's either 14 agencies and 14 tenants doing 14 different things where we're fighting, trying to get them to converge, or 14 agencies in one tenant and then having knockdown dragouts over global tenant settings. So, I mean, the governance has gotten a lot more real for us in the last couple of years as we've gotten more of these big shared services and more of these cloud shared services.
That works. All right, Steve, thank you. Fred Britton.
Yeah, I would say, in addition to things already said, is to sort of be honest about the things that don't work well, right? I mean, the criticisms that you get, you're not as nimble as if we went on our own. They may experience, they could do their own on a shoestring, and in cases, we know there's overall value to state government, but the individual agency may actually see it as more expensive. So don't oversell it.
Yeah. You know, and that's the old piece too, is we always learn from those things that happen that way, right? I've always been a big believer that we need to learn from the things we fail at, but what we aren't always good at is learning from the things we're successful at. So we tear the failures apart, but we don't always tear apart the successes. So it's something I agree with you, Fred, 100%. Rajiv, your piece of advice.
Yeah, so for us, shared services has a little different meaning. We're already consolidated at the past level with all the exec agencies, so they're all using shared platform services anyways. For me, shared services now, I see it more like how do we partner at the state level, maybe create a repository at NASCIO that we have all of these ideas in there so people can look and start to get some, sharing going at that level, because otherwise, we're all reinventing the wheel for the same set of problems.
Yeah, you know, Rajiv, when you think about that sharing this day, I go back to what Fred said too. You can't oversell it, right? It's got to be something that's doable and possible.
Yeah, and the failures got to get documented too, so we don't take the wrong path, right? So it's not only about successes in the repository, it's the do's and don'ts. So we have a good feel for, the experiences that we gathered over the time that we worked on these things on. Yeah.
Yeah. Rajiv, thank you for sharing. Rob, your piece of advice.
Look, I would say, think about shared services as a journey, not a destination. And keep a close pulse on your customer.
Yeah.
From my perspective, and this is my opinion, but the best shared service organizations work from the outside in.
Excellent point, Rob. Thank you. We only have a few minutes left. Doug, your piece of advice.
I'm going to piggyback on what Rob said, and I was going to say basically empower your agencies to take the lead. Our cyber program has flourished really under the guidance of opening up the agency voice to take the lead on what they're experiencing and really what solutions are going to best fit their needs, and then applying it back to the governance model to make sure together as a state we're coming to the right solution.
Excellent, Doug. Thank you. John McMillan.
To quote a former state CIO, you've got to get your money right. You've got to get your people right. Otherwise, it'll keep you up at night. Thank you, Craig.
I love it. Michael.
Communicate, meet regularly, sharing ideas that lead to sharing in all areas. And it's not just tech. However, they'll always come back to us because the internet of everything.
Yes, it is. Derek, your piece of advice for everyone about shared services.
Concentrate on the word shared. The idea being that it's sort of the 80-20 rule, right? Figure out what objectives, what features, what things do you share in common, and I think you can get to agreement a lot quicker.
You know, it's interesting you went there, Derek, too, because that definition of sharing, right? Is it services? Is it technologies? Is it procurement? What is it? And I think that is the drawback sometimes when you're working between governments, that everybody doesn't understand what that word share means. So it can be a bit difficult. So thanks for doing that. And then Jim Weaver. Jim, what is your big piece of advice on shared services?
Well, since my dear friend John took my get the finances right, I would say the other thing I would have the data and the metrics to be able to tell the story of how you're progressing and how things are working, so you're not dealing with anecdotal finger pointing type exercises.
And that's understanding the wins too.
Yes.
All the work.
Celebrate the wins and be able to articulate the oopses.
And the only other thing I could add there too, Jim, is that whole piece about making sure everybody gets a win. Both sides of the relationship or multiple parts of that relationship need to make sure there's a win. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, that just needs to be there.
Yeah, and again, we're all in it for a win. We all work for the residents of the state, the taxpayers. So that's where we have to make sure we're delivering the wins for.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, guys, we're almost done here, and I just want to say thank you. And thank you all for being part of our event today. And I know that virtually it's not always easy to engage, but you all did great. We had a lot of fun too, you know, with this little Cinco de Mayo. I had more questions, but we don't have time for those today. But I want to say thank you for being part of the event. We're going to have more events. And as Terry said, we're looking to do live in the fall. So it'd be nice to be able to see all of you and work with all of you and get to talk more about the different topics. I'm a big believer in shared services. I'm the kind of person that believes that governments really shouldn't go alone. Why reinvent the wheel if you don't need to? And we just know that it's not always easy to share. And what we have to do is work through some of those efforts to go there and get there and be successful at it. So again, thank you all for being here. They're going to get ready to shut us down, but I want to thank our sponsors, Accenture, Adobe, AWS, Easy Vote Solutions, HP Inc., McAfee, NIC, SHI, Verizon, and Yline. Also, one last reminder is about the Government Experience Awards are going to be closing on May 12th. So make sure that you get to take a look at the link we've dropped in the chat. So one, we look forward to seeing you all at NASCIO in the fall, and I've enjoyed our breakout and I enjoyed our event today. And thank you all. Stay safe out there and everybody have a great day, okay? Good to see you all. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Lisa, is it just us?
I think so.
So
I
did
think
groups finish? Did the other groups finish?
Alan is not done yet.
Oh,
We're just waiting for
going.
that. I know he's wrapping up.
I didn't want to drop everybody without talking about the sponsors. That's why I wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. We just can't close this until his meeting is done.
Right.
Oh, Margaret's typing.
I think I still hear Terry talking. Is she still?
Oh, I think you hear Diana in the background, maybe. I have the door open in here and she's talking.
I think I hear Terry and her other because I'm in her house.
Oh.
And I said all the sponsors, so we got that, right?
Yeah.
All right. As usual, it's like clockwork, Lisa. We got it done.
Yeah. Oh, he's almost done, it says.
My people just logged off.
I know. Which is fine. I wonder if
Is Steve done?
other people might. Yeah, everyone else was done. So he just keeps talking.
Is that what they said?
That's what Margaret said.
I love it.
Well, that went well.
I thought so.
Yeah.
They're a fun group. You know, once you get them talking, once
Mhm.
they're talking, you got to be careful because they keep going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I always interject that. Well, we only have 15 minutes left, or we only have, that's my way of saying talk faster. But they know their stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
They are excellent.
Yep. They're really, really cool people. These are great groups of people.
They are very cool.
Okay. Okay, he's done, so we can close it out.
All right. Great.
Okay. Great job. Bye.